Check, check, check.
Jello.
What up?
What's up, man?
How are you?
I'm well. If my room is extra echoey, it's because I am in the process of moving out, and there is less furniture in the room that I am presently podcasting in. So, it's good.
It is extra echoey, but we can survive it. We can survive it together.
Yeah, we'll do our best.
We are streaming live right now, so just so you know.
Sweet.
So yeah.
Hi, live streamers.
Nobody's on yet.
No.
I didn't make any announcements either, so I don't even know if anybody's gonna jump on. But it'll people that are oh, there's Paul. Paul's here. Hi, Paul.
Of course he is.
Paul says, "Hey guys," already.
There he is.
All right, so let me just do a quick tweet that I'm doing this, and then I'm ready to start. Oh God.
By the way, 2007, holy difficult year, Batman.
I know.
Jeez Louise.
I know. Here, we'll save it for the show. But yeah, I have like a top 9.
Yeah,
and then honorable
stupid.
mentions after that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, that is a very tough year. The ones that I have to keep off are it's just insane. It's absolutely just insane to me. All right, so here it is. Hey, we're streaming our podcast episode live. Hear us review Detroit.
I love the fact that like this part of it is being streamed live.
Yep.
It's great.
And
Why
it's
not?
gonna be on the YouTube video that's like available afterward for
Exactly.
People are like, wait, what? This is not edited? No, this is raw. This is part of the raw, uncut footage.
Raw. That's what you get if you come visit us on YouTube.
And our top 5 of 2007.
Bump. Paul, this is horrible, but where do you live? I'm curious. I'm going to talk to Paul.
He has to live in New Orleans.
No, I don't want to know from you. I want him to type it in the thing. I want to feel like I'm interacting with him. You just ruin the moment, Shuckster.
He has to. He has to live in New Orleans.
You don't know for sure?
I do not know for sure.
Oh, nice. I like this. Can't wait for his written response. I think there's like was it like 15-second delay on the...
I don't know. We're finding out how big the delay is right now, aren't we? We're patiently waiting to find out.
He probably doesn't want to tell me because he thinks I'm like going to be a creepy stalker and I'll find him.
I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure he's like, I don't want to tell him. Chris Hartwell, where I live.
Hartwell, yeah.
Clearly, there's a very big, long delay because now it's been like a minute.
Maybe he stepped away to make himself a nice sandwich or a burrito or something. I realized, Shuckster, for the one podcast where I was infamously eating.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was worse than I thought it was because I realized I muted my microphone on the Skype call, but I didn't mute my microphone, so the recording I sent you had all of the goodness in there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's why it was way worse than I thought it was.
The infamous episode. Okay, I just realized I forgot my water bottle. Let me grab it, and then I'm ready to start.
The lack of professionalism. To the listener out there who's actually watching this later on YouTube, or listening to it later, rather, I apologize. This is, oh, that's right! Paul, we've talked about this. Katy, Texas. I'm going to be living very close to Paul. We're going to have to hang out. But anyways, yes, this is just, it will get more exciting.
Has Paul finally responded?
Yeah. He grew up in Louisiana, but not in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he lives in Katy, Texas.
Yeah, ironically, that'll be about 20 minutes from where I'm moving.
Uh-oh, some people are going to get some lunch sometime.
All right.
All right, I'm going to click record.
All right. I'm recording as well.
All right. 1,
2.
Okay. I was so mesmerized by this movie, I almost didn't take any notes at all.
All right.
So I'm going to do my best off the top of my dome. All right. Also, I saw it like 3 hours ago, so. Welcome to the Watch and Talk. I'm Dylan Shuck.
And I'm Chris Hartwell from The Heartbeat.
In this podcast, we're going to be reviewing Detroit, as well as our top 5 films of 2007. And you can hear all of our previous reviews at thewatchandtalk.com. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters. If you want to be a supporter of the show, you go to patreon.com/thewatchandtalk. And big shout out to our premium supporters, Shakita, June, Endless Mike, and Kaka.
Kaka!
I think I gave the monthly shout out last week, but just in case I didn't, I'll make sure you guys get a double shout out this week or this month. And that's Ashley, Diane, and Pastaroni. So big shout out to you guys. Chris, have you ever struggled with a social media presence?
Every single day.
Well, guess what? I have a solution for you. That's CoinCrack. All you have to do is go check them out at thewatchandtalk.com/CoinCrack, and you can boost your social media presence. And also big shout out to Ninth Link. Ninth Link designers are ready to listen to your business needs and create websites, applications, and email campaigns. Check them out at thewatchandtalk.com/9thlink. How are we doing, Chris?
I'm well, man.
We've been Chris Light on the podcast here.
This is true. It's just true, and it's something that's pained me. And I mean, it's getting bad, man, because it's one of those situations where, unfortunately, if a week is super busy, one of the things that needs to get axed sometimes is the Watch and Talk, and then right after that is the Heartbeat. And then I haven't even been able to do the Heartbeat the last week or so, which has been painful. So yeah, I'm presently in the process of picking up and moving from California all the way over to Texas. Our move is here in 10 days. So we're in the process of selling a house, in the process of buying a house, in the process of packing up our lives. So life has been busy, but nonetheless, it brings me unending joy to come on this podcast and hang out with my good friend, Mr. Dylan Shuck.
So you're saying there's a chance that we might miss you in another week or two here?
It's possible. It's definitely possible.
It's in the cards. It's in the possibilities. All right. So I guess let's start off real quick with what we've watched recently. I have been on quite a binge. Well, first of all, I talked about it last week. I haven't watched much of it since. But I do want to make sure to mention to you also Ozark on Netflix.
All right.
This show is incredible. This show is incredible. It is the best way I can describe it is it feels like the intensity of the 4th season of Breaking Bad right off the bat. It's a similar idea. It's a super competent, hyper intelligent person who is not a criminal or a violent person at all, kind of thrust into a world of crime incidentally. This one, in Ozark, he's seeking it out a lot less than Walter White seeked it out in Breaking Bad. But regardless, Jason Bateman plays the title character, Laura Linney plays his wife. And
that's interesting.
It is incredible. There's 10 episodes in the first season. I'm only about 3 episodes in. I've been binge watching like an insane person, Curb Your Enthusiasm, because I want to rewatch the entire series before it comes back in October. But hopefully in the next week or two, I will be able to do a podcast episode about the first season of Ozark with somebody on this podcast because I'm that big of a fan of it. So anybody that's been that somehow has slept on the show, it's on Netflix. Just watch the first episode. If you don't like it, then you can move on. But it's impossible to not like it. There's nobody that will watch it and be like, "This isn't good. This isn't something I want to be watching." So did I pitch it well enough or not? Right there.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, what was it? There was some little trailer that I kept on seeing. I think I was just watching random YouTube videos the other day and clicking from one to the next, and the previews for this kept on coming up.
Yeah.
And it looked interesting already just from like a little 15-second preview. So
Somebody was just I saw one of my roommates were watching the first episode, and I kind of just stumbled in on it while they were watching it, and I was like, "What is
So,
this?"
like, were you intoxicated? Why did you stumble in? I mean,
I mean, I had a drink, but I wasn't.
oh, okay.
I wasn't. I was getting ready to go out for the night, and they were watching it, and I stumbled. No, I just walked into the room while they watched it, and I fell in my own puke. No, I'm just kidding. But I was like, "What is this?" Like immediately was asking, "What is this?" Because it was just a very intense scene, very powerful score. The stakes are super high. It seems very frightening. Just from the seconds of being in the room, I was sold on it. So if that sounds interesting to you, Ozark is something to check out. Also, I've watched, just like I said, also I've been like a madman watching Curb Your Enthusiasm. Do you watch?
But not watching Mad Men
Not
like a
Madman.
madman.
Not
Okay.
not Madman like a madman. Wow, we're really just killing it with puns right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Have you watched Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I've watched probably half a dozen episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is an exhausting show to watch. It is just it just piles up because there's so many times where they can get out of a situation just by explaining something and they just don't. But it's just the ability of Larry David to put himself in the most awkward of situations just because he thinks he's standing up for what's right. Is just hilarious, and it really doesn't get old for me. I've already seen this series before, but it's been a very long time. So most of this I do not remember. Almost all of it I don't remember. The one that I remembered, probably the most recently that I watched, was an episode where he needed to get to a Dodger game, and it was massive traffic, so he picked up a prostitute so he could take the carpool lane. So those are the kinds of episodes you get with Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Sounds exactly like what I remember.
He doesn't want sex with the prostitute. He just wants to use the carpool lane. But there's just been there's an episode where he finds out that his mom died when he came back from a vacation. He got it out of his dad that his mom had died. And he goes, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said, "She didn't want you to be bothered while you were on vacation." And he goes, "Okay, well, how long ago was this?" And he goes, "Okay, well, the funeral was on Friday, so it was only a couple days before that." And then he's like, "Wait a second, the funeral already happened." Just like those kinds of scenarios to me are just so hilarious, and and then the rest of the episode, he gets out of all of his social obligations that he wants out of so much. He gets out of them by saying that his mom died. So he just like, wow, first somebody's asking him to do something, and he says, "I can't because my mom just died," and he's like, "Oh, okay, no problem, take your time, no problem." And then he's like realizes the power that he has. You see on his face, he's like, "Oh my god, I can use this to get out of anything." And the rest of the episode, he's just getting everything he wants because of that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm having a lot of fun with Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I'm excited for the new season to start. It's been I believe 6 years since the last season aired, and it never ended. They never said, "Hey, this is the last season" or anything like that. So it's exciting that out of nowhere, a big announcement came that a new season's coming. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's coming in October. So that's what I've watched recently. I also went and saw the Dark Tower. I
cannot wait for you to tell me how this film is.
Okay, so I'll say this. As far as a movie goes, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets is way worse of a movie. But it's at least Valerian was like ambitious in what it was trying to do. This movie is so bland. Matthew McConaughey, it's like I'm back to thinking of Matthew McConaughey, what I thought of him before the McConaissance.
That's funny and sad.
This has soiled my opinion of. This is recent, It's only been a couple hours since I've seen this movie, so I'm probably being dramatic. But
what you dramatic? No,
come on. He's not good in this movie at all, and he's actively just awful. And his motivations are never explained, and everything is skipped ahead. They just kind of try to get to the movie in an hour and a half, and it really feels rushed. even though it feels rushed, it still feels like a movie that took forever. So anyway, it's just so not worth watching. It's a bad movie. So that's what I have to say about. We were thinking about doing an episode, but I think the plans of that kind of fell through, so I don't think we're doing an episode on that. But I may have an article coming out on the Hollywood Reporter about the Dark Tower here shortly. So look forward to that. And that's what I've watched recently. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of fun recently rewatching some films and some documentaries that I'm a huge fan of. So nothing brand new for me, but I recently rewatched Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. Stanley Kubrick is a filmmaker that fascinates me. He I don't think really has made any decisions cinematically that I could ever claim in a million years that I would make if I was directing a film from one of his screenplays, and that's what I love about him: the fact that he's so unique and distinct and auteur through and through. And I would say that actually, of all of his films, Paths of Glory for me is probably the most I can almost grasp what he's actually doing cinematically. It's one of his earlier films starring Mr. Kirk Douglas, and it takes place during World War I. Basic premise is this entire battalion of French soldiers refuse to make this charge that their general, potentially in a very foolhardy, braggadocious sort of way, asks them to do. And because of that, he forces 3 people from each battalion to stand trial. And it's kind of this court case meets a war film. And it's excellent. If you guys have not seen this film, treat yourself. It's really well done. And again, I feel like being earlier in Kubrick's career, it's in no way a film that is not made by someone who's clearly a master of the art, but you can still feel him kind of finding his own feet and figuring out what his voice is, which is fun to see, especially as we watched other films in his career, be it Dr. Strangelove or 2001. That again, just for me, are just so beyond my grasp of how the heck someone can conceive of and execute brilliance like that. I also rewatched Michael Mann's Collateral. I love this film. I remember 2004 seeing it, and it's the same year that Ray came out, and Jamie Foxx won Best Actor for that. And though I will happily admit that I think he did a brilliant job in Ray, I think his better performance is actually in Collateral, just because it's so subtle and it's so difficult to play the straight man. But the fear and the anger and the adrenaline that he captures in that film is unbelievable. And Tom Cruise is so good in the film, playing this really slick, silver-foxed hitman, and their dynamic and chemistry is just outstanding.
I wonder when Tom Cruise is going to embrace that look.
He should embrace it sooner than later, because I feel like when I see him on red carpets now, I'm like, wow, he's getting old. I mean, it's amazing to me the action stunts that he's still able to pull off, because that always says, like, wow, is he actually in his 60s? Or, I think he's almost in his 60s anyways. But nonetheless, he's starting to look his age, which is not a bad thing. So
I agree. And the most glaring was The Mummy. That was the most glaring, that he was playing somebody way younger than he actually is.
Sure. Yeah.
He's actually 55.
Okay, there we go. All right.
So he's not as. See, now we're assuming that you're older. Like, come on, man. Like, Tom Cruise, you're listening to this, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I just go for the look from Collateral. Like, try that out for like 10 years.
It's a good look.
I think it's a great look. I think it's a fantastic look. I'm into it.
I'm very, very excited. Speaking of Tom Cruise, I just thought of this because this trailer played in front of Detroit. I am so excited for Doug Liman's American Made. I think that looks fantastic.
It does look pretty good.
If you, the listener, have not seen that trailer, American Made starring Tom Cruise, again, treat yourself. That the thing looks really fun and exciting, and I love Doug Liman as a director. I think he does some fun films. I also watched, in preparation for some of my Comic-Con interactions, the making of documentary for the original Blade Runner, Dangerous Days. And if you guys are interested at all in behind-the-scenes documentaries, this is one of the best out there. It's just very candid and doesn't pull punches on some of the, more trying elements of that film and the production of it. It's really well done. The great thing about that too is because I had just watched that before actually talking to some of the writers, actually the two main writers from Blade Runner 2049, as well as Harrison Ford. I was able to pull out some wicked cool knowledge that I think they were quite tickled by. So it was good times. And that's what I watched recently.
All right, let's get this kicked off. Let's go over our top 5. This is one of those times where we're going to pick a random year. And we're going to go over our top 5 from the year 2007. I knew that I had one of my favorite movies, probably 2 of my favorite movies of all time in that year, which was Atonement and No Country for Old Men, which I don't know why I spoiled the top of my list.
I was just going to say, you moron. Why'd you do that?
But I didn't realize how deep this list went and what a struggle this was. So we're going to still have our top 5, but we're going to have a pretty... I struggled to get it down to 6 honorable mentions. How many
honorable mentions, I presently have 7.
Okay, so I think we can kind of briefly... fly over our honorable mentions. I'm going to go over my first honorable mention. We'll just go back and forth on honorable mentions.
All right.
First one, There Will Be Blood. And I really, really, really struggled to not have this on my top 5 because this was originally firmly on my top 5. But as I went along and I found other movies, I found myself realizing that it's really... Daniel Day-Lewis's performance that I treasure so much from that movie over the film itself. So due to that, there's 5 other films that just knocked this film just down a peg, moving this just out of the top 5. But if I was going purely by performance, it's probably the best performance of that, other than maybe Javier Bardem's performance that year. But that's one of the greatest performances. One of them of all time, it's in the conversation to be on some top list somewhere for There Will Be Blood. So There Will Be Blood barely made it out of the top 5 at the last second.
I'll just continue to talk about that one because that's on my honorable mention list as well. And I agree with all the things you just said. And something else that I really appreciate about Paul Thomas Anderson, the director, with this film specifically is how I saw him challenging himself. This is a director and a writer who clearly loves to write dialogue, who can write it brilliantly, as we saw in films like Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love. And the fact that the first, is it 15, 20 minutes this film is completely devoid of any dialogue, I think is such a cool thing to see a director pushing himself to really tell the story visually and only visually. That was just so exciting. And also something I love about Paul Thomas Anderson is just how he uses music, and it's this driving, pulsing force. I think a lot of filmmakers, sometimes in a wise way, sometimes in an unnecessary way, think that music should just disappear into the background and do nothing but kind of just underscore things. And I love how he uses music, and this film is no exception. Also, I have to mention Paul Dano. I think he turns in a fantastic performance, and seeing him and Daniel Day performing off one another is just outstanding. I think their chemistry and the way that you can really see them challenging one another, not just as characters, but as performers. And I think the results are pretty astounding.
All right. My next honorable mention is the directorial debut of Ben Affleck.
I need to see this film. I still have not seen Gone Baby Gone.
Another movie that's extremely hard for me to not have in the top 5. It's one of the movies that can make you stop. It doesn't present it this way, but you can really stop and think, hey, did the hero make the right decision in the end? Because they were doing it for the right reasons, but was it the right decision? I don't know. I think this is a study of critical thinking, because the hero ends up doing the right thing, but it doesn't feel like it's the right decision in this one situation. And you can make you see that things are not so black and white sometimes. And I think that this movie, Gone Baby Gone, is an excellent study of critical thinking, and did not make me feel like while I knew that they had made the right decision, I didn't know if it was the right thing for the characters involved. So for that reason, Gone Baby Gone, which is a fantastic film directed by Ben Affleck, and hurts me so much to leave it out the top 5.
I had to include a comedy on this list because I remember seeing this film and it really kind of changing my perspective on what comedies could be and what they were maybe kind of becoming in this new 21st century landscape, and that was Judd Apatow's Knocked Up. I think still I have to rewatch his films, but I still think Knocked Up is my favorite. It kind of goes back and forth of Judd Apatow's. It kind of goes back and forth between this and the 40-Year-Old Virgin. But Apatow's ability, and this is in no means new, but it certainly isn't easy to do for a filmmaker, his ability to segue so seamlessly back and forth between really gut-busting comedy and something that's very sincere, truthful, and poignant. Obviously, for a lot of actual real people, getting pregnant out of wedlock is no laughing business. But there is also comedy to be found there, and the fact that he was true to both of those things, and able to capture that well. And I think this is probably the first time I saw Katherine Heigl, and I think that was good because I don't think I'm the hugest fan of her, but when I saw the movie, I thought she was just a brilliant actress. I'm like, wow, she's really playing this part really well, and she's just I can't wait to see where she goes in her career. And then kind of realizing, oh wait, that was kind of just her being herself. Interesting. And then too, it was great to see someone like Seth Rogen, who had seen in small bit parts like 40-Year-Old Virgin and Freaks and Geeks, really step up and lead a film was excellent. So yeah,
you know what I love is that Judd Apatow never stuck with the same lead actor for too long. Every next movie pulled somebody from the background and gave them the starting role.
Yeah,
and
cool.
He did that over and over and over again. You know, we later in the same year, which is the next movie on my list, Superbad, which is Jonah Hill's his rise to fame. I think about where comedy would be right now in film if it wasn't for Judd Apatow, if he had never existed, and it really makes me just disappointed with how everybody's blowing it with comedy. Everywhere in film. Like, there's no comedies now come out with big whimpers and they're just not funny and they're trying too hard and they're poop and piss jokes. And Judd Apatow took comedy to the next level, and it made these, these movies that he either produces or directs. You feel like you're getting your ticket's worth because you're getting a movie out of it, not just an attempt to make you laugh with fart and poop jokes. Because there's so many bad comedies that come out that are just so actively unfunny. Zoolander 2, Vacation from a year or two ago. There's just so many movies like this. Baywatch, and these just movies that come out and make you realize that it's not guaranteed that we get good comedy. And it's actually pretty rare nowadays for really good comedy movies to come out. And Judd Apatow is really at the helm of a lot of them, either as a director or a producer, like with The Big Sick this year, which is one of my favorite movies of the year, which is produced by him as well. So anyway, Superbad next on my list. This was a big turning point for Judd Apatow and for comedy in general when both Knocked Up and Superbad came out this year. What's next on your list?
Totally. I got to include the third in the Bourne trilogy. I'm kind of an outspoken disliker of shaky cam, and I think one of the few directors that can do it all right sometimes is Paul Greengrass, and I felt like the strongest entry from him in this franchise is, in my opinion, definitely the Bourne Ultimatum, and the fact that 3 films in, they were able to kind of do the exact same thing. Like, oh, there's more mysteries in Jason Bourne's past that have yet to be revealed, and he's going to continue to dig deeper, and we're going to end with the same Moby song, and yet it still worked. And I think I appreciate this film all the more when just this last year, the most recent Jason Bourne film came out and just fell flat. Oh my goodness. It felt so tired and dull and bored. And the fact that they were able to avoid that with this film and make some really kick-butt action sequences and an interesting twisty turning plot, it's just very impressive. I think they did an outstanding job there. So yeah,
I shouldn't edge that one off my list because it belongs on many lists that I've even done before in the past. So I'm gonna second that one, and I'm gonna extend my honorable mentions to 7. I had that on. I don't know why I took it off at the last second, but I did. Next on my list is Robert Zemeckis directed motion capture, Beowulf.
Yeah.
which is one of the most original ways I've seen a story told in general, where the first half of the movie is just a story, and then the second half of the movie is the aftermath. And I just didn't know what to expect or where to expect with the pacing next and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very adult story also. It's not for kids, and couldn't even imagine this told not motion capture either. I couldn't imagine this being being a live action movie as well. But anyway, Beowulf is next on my honorable mentions.
I didn't include this, but I really do enjoy Beowulf quite a bit, and for me, it's my favorite of Zemeckis' stint in the motion capture world. Definitely. Over Polar Express and A Christmas Carol. It's got some good stuff going on in there.
It's but my next film, the adult one from those as well. It's not when you're watching, you're not sitting there being like, this is a movie for kids.
Totally. My next film on there, in my opinion, should have won the Academy Award for best cinematography, though there's another film on this list that I think ended up kind of being the one that canceled it out, and that's The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, starring Mr. Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck. Wow, he had a good year that year. Man, that's awesome. Casey Affleck also starred in Gone Baby Gone. This film is such a kind of mesmerizing, kind of just lyrical exploration into this person. It kind of it wears the trappings of a Western film, but it certainly doesn't have any of the exciting action sequences like something like 3:10 to Yuma, or any sort of the just kind of some of the things that you might think of when you think of an exciting Western film. It's much more of an interesting character study, looking at Jesse James and the coward Robert Ford, and their relationship and their dynamic, and potentially why Jesse James was assassinated. And it's just, it's a very interesting piece, gorgeous to look at. Like I said, I think it should have won best cinematography. Roger Deakins is the man. What more can I say?
My next movie on my honorable mentions. Oh, these are some long honorable mentions, man. Jason Reitman directed, written by Diablo Cody, and that is Juno. It is the Ellen Page breaking on the scene as well as a teenager who gets an unplanned pregnancy, and her just kind of dealing with it in a kind of a quirky way. But it was just so welcome. Diablo Cody's script in this, and I believe this won best original screenplay at the Oscars this year too. I don't know if I remember that correctly. But such a welcome voice into so many screenplay writers in Hollywood are so bogged down by Hollywood. I guess that's the best way to say it. And Diablo Cody just seemed so fresh and have new ideas and have a new type of quirkiness that really kind of an original voice that you get. And she's done a lot of fantastic movies that I've seen too throughout the years. Breaking the Flash was one of my favorite movies from a couple years ago. But anyway, Juno was, I think, it's hard to believe that these many movies came out this year. We were saying before we recorded how hard 2007 was. I didn't expect it to be this hard. But yeah. Because I have one more movie to mention also.
Yeah, I'll actually X-name one of my films so we have an even amount. And I'll just mention the film before the Devil Knows You're Dead, starring Ethan Hawke and Philip Seymour Hoffman. This is a film that I came to way later, but was just really impressed by. The performances from the two lead actors are phenomenal. And it's one of those films that sort of depicts an event that was supposed to play out one way and it ends up playing out a very different way. And you just watch kind of humankind and mankind devolve into these extremely selfish, self-preservation creatures. And it has a lot of interest in exploring the darker side of humanity and what our brokenness can push us to, and the places that will take us. That in a blink of an eye, you thought your life was going to go one way, and then it goes another way, and just the realization that you often are the master of your own destruction. And it's just that the performances in it especially are outstanding. It's in no way a happy, fun time of a film, but if you're looking for something dark and depressing, but also very truthful, I think this is a great film for you.
The last one I just want to mention briefly, I think it's just because I think this is a movie a lot of people might have slept on, but it's called Reign Over Me. and it stars Adam Sandler and Don Cheadle. The plot summary is a man who lost his family in September 11th attack on New York City runs into his old college roommate, rekindling their friendship. The one thing that appears able to help the man recover from his grief. I'm sorry, rekindling the friendship is the one thing that appears to help the man recover from his grief. So Adam Sandler probably puts on one of the best performances of his career as a man in deep, deep, deep pain after losing his entire family on September 11th. And he explores that in a very touching way in this movie with Don Cheadle, who's an excellent co-star in that film. So it's a movie that will make you tear up if you're a human. So if that may... if
you're an alien, not going to happen.
If you're a dog listening to this, then it might not happen. Because you don't have tear ducts. If that's a movie that a lot of people may have slept on, I just wanted to throw it on there just to recommend it to people just in case they might not have seen it. So,
the last movie on my honorable mention list before we actually get to our top 5, it's ridiculous, is Frank Darabont's and Stephen King's The Mist. Yes, this is a film that got a lot of flack for a lot of different reasons, and I think, in my opinion, the way the movie affects me, they're not justifiable reasons. So one of the things that always gets leveled at this film is just, it's a cheesy monster movie. I would say that's intentionally a cheesy monster movie. And if you think it's about the monsters, I think you're missing the point. I think it's about the monsters within us and how we're more monstrous than perhaps actual monsters without us. And then also a lot of people say that the ending is just so unjustified and just so horrible. And I think that the ending's brilliant. I think that continues to explore the monster within and the things that we do to ourselves and to others. And I think the movie is pretty great. And if you ever have a chance to watch it, definitely try and watch it in the black and white format that's on the DVD and Blu-ray. It definitely adds to, I think, what Frank Darabont wanted to do with the film, which is kind of make this homage to kind of a classic B film monster movie. And I think it works pretty well.
And that's, arguably one of my favorite directors of all time, also Frank Darabont as well.
He's pretty great.
All right, so let's get into our top 5. I'm going to start off right off the bat with my my number 5, which was a movie that was a follow-up to A History of Violence, directed by David Cronenberg. And it's called Eastern Promises, about a Russian teenager living in London who dies during childbirth, leaves clues to a midwife in her journal that could tie her child to a rape involving a violent Russian mob family. The matter-of-fact violence that he shows in this movie and A History of Violence is just so raw and visceral that it's something that is just magnetic. I can't stop looking at just its matter-of-factness and its violence. For that reason, this was my 5th favorite movie of 2007.
It's an excellent movie, and actually the film that I cut from my honorable mention to be even with you was Eastern Promises. I think it's a fantastic film. But my number 5 is David Fincher's Zodiac. This is definitely a film that I didn't immediately love the first time I watched it. I went in going, oh, this is the director of Seven, and I love how scripty in a cool way Seven was. The fact that it has these specific stages of the 7 deadly sins, yep. And just the reveals and the twist ending, and it just in a very cool way felt like a very smart script, and it felt like a Hollywood movie that was just really well crafted, and I love that about Seven. And I was expecting that with Zodiac because it's about the Zodiac serial killer, and what Fincher, I later realized, very intentionally made something very different to that. It's very restrained visually, and the narrative is intentionally drawn out as to illustrate the feeling that the detectives and the reporters experienced in this case. It wasn't, yes, there were heightened moments of, oh my gosh, we're getting letters from this guy with different puzzles, and we're trying to figure out this before the next murder happens. But ultimately, this isn't a film about the puzzle of catching a killer, but about about obsession and losing oneself to something. In this case, it being the catching of this serial killer, and watching how Fincher kind of lured me in with that, and the style that he chose to tell it in, I think just makes it a brilliant piece of cinema. And again, the restraint that this man shows is impressive as a director. So that's what number 5 is Zodiac.
So now my number 4, I'm putting on my list basically as not just for the film itself, but the impact it had on my life, and that's Into the Wild. Directed and written by Sean Penn. It was based on a book that was so important to me, especially when I was going through college, by the same name, Into the Wild, by John Krakauer, about a student, a college student, after he graduates, abandons all his possessions, gives up all of his money to savings, and then goes and hitchhikes to live in the wilderness in Alaska, and then it's about all the encounters he basically all the people he encounters on the way, and how that how people basically are able to shape his story together based on the encounters. The movie tells half of the story of the book. The half of the book is his story, and the other half of the book is the author's story tracking down the information. But the movie itself is so moving to me. The soundtrack is completely performed by Eddie Vedder by himself. It's very powerful, and it's a soundtrack I listened to in my car for a very long time. It's just a movie that had a big impact on my life, and I hope that most people have gotten around to watching it. But if not, don't sleep on Into the Wild.
I have yet to watch this movie, but I've just heard so many good things about it, and it's one of those ones that I have always wanted to get around to watching. So this is a good encouragement. I like it. But my number 4 is it's a Danny Boyle film called Sunshine, and it's a sci-fi film about this group of astronauts flying to the sun to basically kind of reignite it, because the sun is going out. So their mission is to basically detonate this massive nuclear bomb in the heart of the sun to kind of give it a kickstart. And I think this is one of those films that the 2007 Chris Hartwell absolutely loved, and I'm curious what the 2017 Chris Hartwell will think of it, but I included it on this list just because I loved it when it first came out, and I actually haven't seen it since.
I just hate that it turns into a slasher film.
I was actually just going to mention that. just going to mention that.
I love everything about the movie until it turns into a slasher film, and then for me it becomes forgettable through that.
Sure. Yeah, and I was actually just going to mention, for me, the film does stumble in that final act, and it's, again, something I really want to watch again and just see how I would respond to it now, because I remember that being very jarring, and I was a bit confused by it. And even so, I think that right there is a paradigm of all of Danny Boyle's career, which is he has a very eclectic filmography. Films like The Beach and Trainspotting and Jobs and Steve Jobs. I mean, he's never settled into one thing. Slumdog Millionaire, and it almost felt like
28 Days Later, right?
28 Days Later, yes. It felt like at the 11th hour of this film, he almost got, okay, I'm kind of bored with the sci-fi film I was making. Let's make a slasher film. Nonetheless, I think the performances in this are astounding. I love the music. I love the visuals. And yeah, I just think so much of it works so well.
So my number 3 is a movie you already mentioned earlier in your own mentions, but it is Judd Apatow's directed Knocked Up. Finding the perfect balance between not only having heart and likable characters and memorable characters, but having a lot of laughs in there too, and laughs that continue to be funny throughout time. Right? It's not like the first time you heard it, it's not funny anymore after that. But there's a lot of heart to it, and there's so much likability in these characters, and there's characters that everybody, that found themselves the least bit social awkward at any point in their life can relate with some of these characters somewhere in there. So yeah, Knocked Up.
Such an excellent film.
I have been the Seth Rogen in a relationship before, where dating a girl that I'm like, there's no reason this girl should be dating me right now. So I related with that a lot as well. So yeah. Anyway, Knocked Up, number 3.
My number 3 is another comedy from one of my favorite directors, and that is Mr. Edgar Wright and his film Hot Fuzz. Funny situation. The first time I watched this, I didn't find myself actually appreciating it as much as I do now. It was one of those films that I felt like was almost, for me when I first watched it, it was just like, it was almost like too it was like this is so big. I was expecting a much more lowbrow, kind of easy laughs kind of comedy, and there was a lot more layers and nuance and a lot more tones in this film. Very similar to Shaun of the Dead, he doesn't just try and make a film that's funny. He also tries to make a legitimate action film and a film that has legitimate stakes and a film that has legitimate drama. And I wasn't expecting that the first time I was going in. I was just expecting laugh after laugh after laugh. So if you haven't seen the film, go in knowing that he does attempt to do. And if you go in knowing that and let the film be dramatic, let the film be a great action film, I think you really will appreciate each of those elements, because Edgar Wright is a perfectionist, and I think that really does come across. And also, if you're versed in the world of action films of yore, especially from the 90s and the 80s, then I think you'll appreciate it all the more, because this is his kind of homage to all those action films, and he does it quite well. And the dynamic that we see between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, as also seen in Shaun of the Dead and The World's End, is just brilliant in this film, and all the excellent cameos from Martin Freeman and Bill Nighy and the rest of the crew there is excellent as well. So, yeah, number 3, Hot Fuzz.
My recording stopped out of nowhere. Can I resync with you real quick?
Yes.
1,
2.
Okay. All right. My number 2, which I feel like our 1 and 2 are going to be the same. I don't know what order they're going to be. I'm assuming they're going to be in the same order, but my number 2 is Joel and Ethan Coen's No Country for Old Men. Which, like I said before when I spoiled earlier, is arguably one of my favorite movies of all time. And the fact that the Coen brothers can make suspense out of anything in this movie, the way they can make suspense out of a coin toss, where it makes you feel like, it's... game 7 in the last 2 minutes of the game, just the same amount of suspense on there when somebody's flipping a coin in a movie, and all the random different ways that they add suspense in this in the movie is insane. Also, Javier Bardem, one of the scariest villains of all time,
so
good,
good,
cold, calculated villain in this. So anyway, No Country for Old Men is my number 2.
My number 2 is also No Country for Old Men. It's funny. I think this actually might have been the first Coen Brothers film that I saw, so it was pretty delightful for me from this point.
You hadn't seen Fargo at this point?
No, yeah, I missed the boat on all of their films previous to this.
Got it.
It was just great going back and watching films like Fargo, and then watching films like The Big Lebowski and Barton Fink, and a lot of them have dark comedy and dark tones that are obviously really pronounced in No Country for Old Men. But comparatively, No Country for Old Men is almost a very kind of simple, straight up drama. And I loved actually watching their other films and then going back to watch No Country for Old Men and seeing actually, that dark humor is absolutely in there. And it's just very subtle. And I love, similar to what I was describing with the Zodiac. I love seeing directors challenge themselves and not just do the same thing, and actually intentionally muting some of their voices to tell a specific story. And again, I think the reason that the film There Will Be Blood, which did have great cinematography, ended up winning was the fact that also No Country for Old Men was Roger Deakins behind the camera. And I felt like those two films kind of like split the vote in the Academy. And just, again, brilliant cinematography from him, and excellent work from people like Tommy Lee Jones that I think sometimes can kind of mail it in. I love seeing these characters that he plays when I feel like he really is invested, but also you can almost see him, just some of the tiredness and world weariness of Tommy Lee Jones actually comes out in a natural way in that character in the film, and it's cool to see them kind of pulling from that. Obviously, Shucks already mentioned. I feel like this for me, anyways. Like, this was the performance that really defined Javier Bardem's career, and in a similar way to Christoph Waltz. I feel like Christoph Waltz. People have been trying to kind of draw that out of him again. And my favorite performances from Javier Bardem since then have been the instances where directors have asked him to do something very different. And I'm really excited to see what, for instance, Darren. Yeah, exactly. But I'm really curious to see what Darren Aronofsky will pull out for Mother. It's this horror film that's coming out here with Jennifer Lawrence, and I'm really excited to see what he'll be doing there. So, anyways, brilliant film.
Yes, Miss Sparrow.
Sparrow.
Our both of our number 1. It would be in my top 5 of all time. if I was to be forced to put in this top 5 of all time list, which I don't know if I'll ever be able to do.
You got to do it, man.
But that is Atonement.
It's so good. It's so good.
It is by director Joe Wright, who is now doing the upcoming Winston Churchill movie coming out, Our Darkest Hour. This year, which looks like Gary Oldman's finally going to get his due at the Oscars. Hopefully, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's a tale that is told. It's told all the time. I love how the tale is told through different time periods and from different perspectives. You get one person's side of the story, and then it stops, and then it goes and tells you the other person's perspective until it's caught up. The cinematography of this movie, including a big long
Seamus McGarvey is the man,
including a long tracking shot
through Dunkirk
that goes on through Dunkirk. That's correct.
Yep.
In this movie is something that is just to be studied forever and ever and ever. But this is one of my favorite movies of all time.
And then we got the music in there too from Dario Marianelli, who incorporates a lot of on the set audio. So, like for instance, one of the pinnacle and most important moments in the story is this letter that he writes and then accidentally gives the wrong letter to the wrong person. The wrong things are read, etc., etc. And the typing of that letter obviously is done on a typewriter.
Yes.
The noise of that.
Yep.
Is incorporated into the sound design, and there are other moments too when someone's like banging the hood of a car, and that's incorporated into the music. And I love the way that Joe Wright uses that music as this kind of pulsing driving force that also drives the camera and the fluidity of the Steadicam shots that he gets of young Saoirse Ronan. This was her first performance that she just blew all of us away in, walking through this house. And again, like Shuckster's mentioned, just the fact that we have these differing points of view, and actually that's kind of a good thing to segue us into the discussion about Detroit, and the fact that we are kind of peeking in on these different people's perspectives and unsure actually who to fully believe and actually what's true and all that kind of stuff is so excellently done. And it's also just it's a very unique story in that structure, in the sense that at a certain point in the film, things become a bit of a montage, and then it settles back into more of a normally structured story. And it's something that certainly could have been a disaster from a narrative telling standpoint.
It's mind-boggling they put it together into a cohesive story.
Yeah, it really is impressive.
Also, really great supporting performances with people like Benedict Cumberbatch and Juno Temple in that movie as well.
Yes.
But it is one for if anybody happens to be listening to this hasn't seen Atonement yet. It's
like Paul. Yes, you do need to atone for not seeing Atonement, Paul.
It is my favorite experience I've ever had watching a director's commentary as well, along with a film. It's by far my favorite. I've seen a lot of commentaries too, but there's nothing that's going to make you look at a movie differently by watching a director's commentary. So if you have access to this on DVD or Blu-ray or anything like this, go listen to the director's commentary along with this as well. So that's our list, our in-depth list. Now, before we get into our third hour of this podcast, let's get into our review of Detroit. The plot summary of the film is: amidst the chaos of the Detroit rebellion, with the city under curfew, and as the Michigan National Guard patrolled the streets, 3 young African-American men were murdered at the Algiers Motel. So we're going to give a non-spoiler review. I mean, the IMDb plot summary probably spoils more than we could spoil through it, but we'll try to keep most of it. I mean, this is all historical events, but we'll try to keep most of our conversation to a spoiler section at the end. But we'll do our basic thoughts on the film and give our letter grade. And so, Chris, as always, why don't you take it away?
Oh boy, man! This is a tough film for me, and not just because the content is based on a true story and based on a very tragic true story, and also the events that unfold in this film are unfortunately in a lot of ways continuing to happen today, with police brutality and racism, and so that all made it tough.
Systemic racism too.
Right.
That's something that's important to explain, that it's built kind of within the system, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
a person choosing, right? It's just a kind of a system that's kind of set up against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was just tough to watch for that reason, but it was also tough to parse through because I couldn't tell if Catherine Bigelow was the director. If you don't know, she also did the film The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, as well as Point Break. I couldn't tell exactly what she was trying to do with the point of view that she was infusing into this film. There was a feeling for me that I was never given a chance, that she never tried. I don't know if she was being daring or if she was being cowardly in how she was actually telling the story, because she never once actually tried to explain why these people are doing what they're doing. There was never that moment where we had that conversation, that heartfelt conversation about why this person feels racist, why this person feels afraid, why this person feels angry. It's just shown, and in a lot of ways it felt almost like I was watching news coverage. There wasn't this commentary, there wasn't an attempt to get into these people's minds. And again, that could be a bold choice, and a very respectful choice in the fact that she's not trying to make a judgment call, or that could be cowardly. Like I don't know what she was trying to do necessarily. But before I get more into that, I'll just say this too. I think Catherine Bigelow is an excellent director in drawing really great performances out of her actors. I apologize, I don't know his name. The young actor who was in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the third Chronicles of Narnia film, plays one of the leads in this film.
Algie Smith, the singer.
No, he's the African American. Excuse me, he's the Caucasian guy. The main cop.
Oh, Will Poulter.
Thank you. Yes.
He was the good guy in The Revenant.
Yes.
He
That's
he
true.
was like the person that saved Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant, and kind of an opposite character in this movie.
Yeah, and we also have John Boyega's character in there, and he kind of plays this security guard who gets caught up in this whole situation. I'm really excited to talk about in the spoiler section a couple of the scenes that I thought he just rocked. So yeah, Catherine Bigelow really pulled some beautiful, daring. I mean, I can't imagine being on this set and having to perform some of these scenes, and the fact that she was able to encourage her actors to go to these places and I think portray racism and brutality accurately was impressive. I was very impressed by that, and there were some very tense moments in this film. And also, again, this is something that I'm just not exactly sure how I feel about still, but there was definitely a feeling of, I felt like I was seeing real life events in the sense that I was kind of torn up inside. I wasn't sure how to feel about these things and why this is happening. And I think that she kind of presented that point of view where you're kind of constantly popping into these people's stories in the middle. You're not kind of starting at the beginning of any one thing and able to journey with them. And there were a couple of moments in the film, one specifically where this group of singers is about to go onto stage, and they're waiting to go on the stage, and the performers before them are on stage performing, and they're singing their own song. And the group waiting to go on, they rehearse one of their songs, and you hear both songs conflicting, and there was this feeling of there are these just different conflicting songs and different conflicting lives in this piece, and they're trying to do their own thing. They're trying to blaze their own trail, sing their own song, and not necessarily listening to those around them and appreciating the things that are in front of them. And I thought that this entire film did that in this very kind of just unsettling way. And again, I'm not sure how I feel about that. If that was the right or wrong decision, just because this is such a real and present issue in our society still. There was something too just about there's a actually I'll say that for spoilers. There's a final title card and what it says.
I know what you're talking about too.
It kind of I didn't know how it hit me. So I think.
Well, I was going to say one thing.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people have said walking away from this movie is they don't understand. I mean, I guess it's frustrating sometimes to see what stance she's trying to take, and then she seems to be taking a contradictory stance, where she seems to be making a stance that there's, like I was talking about earlier, systemic, a whole system designed against groups of people in this country. then she kind of sets forward the argument that there's a few bad apples, but the system itself isn't. Where we see some bad cops, straight up bad cops. And then we see another cop that encounters one of those people later and says, "Oh my God, who would ever do this to a person?"
Yes.
How could
moments like that just felt so dishonest to me. They didn't feel earned to me. They felt like she was just like kind of walking along and like, oh, I want to bring in a balanced perspective. Quick, throw this in here. And
well, here's the thing: is I think that especially around talking about things that are as touchy as this, and this is especially a touchy conversation right now, especially starting with in 2015 when the Black Lives Matter movement kind of created a conversation and made people feel comfortable arguing against Black people saying that their lives matter. The fact that people out there think that there's an argument to be made there is, and there's people out in droves now. People are very comfortable going and arguing against a Black person saying their lives matter. But here's the thing: is I'm assuming what Catherine Bigelow thought when she went to make this movie is that you could lose people's ears really easily by making them feel like you're not understanding their side at all. And I think she wanted every side to feel like they had been heard and explored. Right? I don't think she wanted to make a piece saying, "Hey, all cops are bad," because that would have been unacceptable, right? But then she kind of balanced a line that I don't think really pleased anybody, because I don't think anybody necessarily have their arguments was completely hit out of the park. But I think the movie was set out to make somebody see another point of view, to give enough ground to people that might be arguing against the Black Lives Matter movement and say, look, we're not saying all cops are bad, but just hear us out. So I think she ceded ground in order to not lose people's ears, if that makes sense.
No, totally. And I'm so torn up about it, of whether or not she did that in the most effective way. I felt like I was never able to go with any of the characters. So I was wanting to spend more time with that group of guys up in the attic area with the toy starter gun, and I was wanting to spend more time with John Boyega's character, and I was wanting to spend more time with, is it Will Coulter? I'm sorry, Yeah, I want to spend more time with his character.
I didn't want
understand.
To spend more time with him at all, but I think that was on purpose. That was on purpose.
There were certain moments where I suddenly saw a fear and something human in his eyes, and there's no way to justify what he did, in no way, and I don't think that his actions should be justified. But
he thought he was at war. And he made that very clear, right?
I guess so. But like at the same time, there was just that systemic racism too that was seemed to be driving it, and maybe that the fact that he was at war was his excuse for kind of excising these and pouring out these racist feelings and an excuse to do so. So
now also this movie also showed group mentality and group think, and mob mentality. How we see a riot started in the streets of Detroit by people just, it's not a group of people who set out to go start a riot, but, one person did something and then another person does something, another person does something. Same thing happens with the cops, where you can see cops and National Guardsmen looking and saying, this is not right, what is happening, but still kind of go along with it because they think that's what's for the best or what they need to do, or just, they start following somebody that seemed to be to know what he was doing. And basically this movie is in 3 different parts. It's the beginning part is documentary style, very handheld camera style, of the starting of these riots in the streets of Detroit after they busted a bar, and they hauled off a bunch of people in the bar, a bunch of cops, 3 vans full of people, all African Americans, and the street crowd around seeing that happening saw an injustice and decided they wanted to fight back, and it started a quote unquote rebellion or revolution. And they say, they said, why the violence? They're asked in one of the scenes, why the violence? And the person responded, did you say why the violence when the founding fathers started a revolution that they started against tyranny? So that shows like the kind of their argument is they felt like that they were standing up for freedom and that kind of stuff. And you see the other perspective as far as that goes. Then the second part of the movie, which is the bulk of the movie, which takes place in a standoff, police raid of a hotel that they explained in the plot summary, a motel in the streets of Detroit during the riots. And then the third part is court and aftermath of it, and kind of how the system came through for everybody in the end. So just to kind of give an explanation of how that goes. The middle part, which is the meat and potatoes of the movie, the part that's really resonates the most, I think, and is basically a horror film, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a horror film. You feel like you're watching the main cop who gets drunk in power, and he's even called out on it a couple times, and like, you're on some type of trip. Somebody says to him, some type of power trip, and there's some white girls in there as well that are caught up in it, and to see their perspective of it and say, like, I don't know, like, what you're on right now, and how differently they're treated also than all the African Americans that were in the hotel as well, is just is horrific in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, yeah. The film does not in any way shy away from depicting this as horrific as I'm sure it was. And I was just going to mention before I wrap up my review here, just I think for me, my two favorite moments in this film were ones where I felt like the trappings of what these people were doing and all that kind of stuff was pulled back. The curtain was pulled back, and I saw the fear, and I'll talk about these more in depth in the spoilers section. But one involves John Boyega and one involved Will Coulter, where things turn and suddenly they realize how much hot water they're in.
Yep.
And there's something very human in both of those moments. And for Boyega especially, for being, I think, one of the most upstanding characters in the film, seeing that happen to him.
Yep.
And I think this is what I'm talking about. Seeing someone who you thought you understood and thought that his actions would actually allow him to continue on in peace and then live the life that he deserves, because this is, he's been doing the right thing, suddenly pulled out from beneath him, and hearing every single word that escapes his mouth just dig him deeper, even though you know the truth,
right?
Was just terrifying. I thought that was a brilliant moment. And there's another moment when the Will Coulter character, one of his fellow cops, does something, and you just see suddenly this shift and what he was and how he was approaching
and there's
things.
A chance
and it's just
too
brilliant.
that you're sitting there being like, I think that actually just happened, right?
Yeah.
And and you do see a complete shift in he's not holding the cards anymore after that happes.
Exactly. The power has been lost. So yeah, for all these reasons, I'm going to give the film a B. I think it's a film that is absolutely worth your time. And if for no other reason, even if you're like me and you walk out kind of unsure about what the film is trying to say, I think it's a good conversation starter. And I think it's important though to go in knowing your own blind spots, because I think it could unfortunately stir up a lot of anger and actually quelch good conversation and just bring out the badness in each of us.
Sure.
But I think if you allow it to be a mirror and allow it to kind of ask yourself, where am I in this topic, and what sort of brokenness in me is wanting to spell out when I see these things. I think it can be a very powerful and effective film, but it's certainly not one that will in any way hold your hand in a loving sort of way or allow you to feel balanced or settled in the point of view that you're watching this story from.
Most of the second part of the movie, you want it to be over. And that's intentional, right? It's not. She really does capture this situation and the hopelessness of it. How they're going to get out of this. This is bad for both sides, and the stakes are high for both sides. So I appreciate that feeling that I had was something that was put into me by Catherine Bigelow, so I appreciate that. To go along with what you were saying too about knowing your own blind spots, I think that that this is a movie that yeah, it can open your eyes to another perspective. I don't know that it necessarily will, but I think that anybody that disagrees can at least understand that the victims of the murders that happen in this movie, the situation they were in, and that can happen, and I think a lot of people can get withdrawn from kind of an anti-police kind of conversation throughout the country that happens kind of now. But I don't think that that's the way it's really intentioned. But there are some situations where police do have too much power or have run away with it. And this kind of shows you the horror that can happen from that. It doesn't mean that we don't want cops or that cops are bad in general. And this movie is very clear about having its showing there are bad apples and there are non-bad apples in the system. But it also shows the system kind of messed up. We see a police officer committing a murder early on in the movie, and we see him get in trouble for that, and still, while I think the district attorney says he's going to be pressing murder charges against him, but he's still able to serve duty that day. Later,
yeah, sends him back on the streets.
Sends him back on the streets until the case is closed. So that has to kind of show you something about how a system kind of set up where maybe that person should not be back on the streets that night. But also, there were some desperate times at that point in our history as well. This movie for me brought tears to my eyes. It was incredibly powerful to me. It's frustrating. And I think a lot of the frustrations are shown through the frustrations of characters in it. So when during the court system, there's some frustrating line of questioning, and somebody being questioned finally says, "Why are you questioning me? Why am I being questioned right now?" And they at least give voice to the frustrations you might be feeling when you see the situation happening. There isn't really necessarily a silver lining to this movie, though, so that's not something to necessarily expect. I think this is just more of a snapshot of time, and to make us all walk away and say, how much have we grown since then as a nation? But I guess most of it, the rest, I think we could save for a conversation. But I also must say that John Boyega was fantastic in this movie.
Oh, I love that actor. He's so great. He's so great.
And the scene that exactly what you're saying, when he sees a situation that he's in, and you see his hand trembling.
Yes.
So powerful. And
goosebumps right now.
So much was just in that scene with no lines of dialogue. Very little dialogue was happening in that sequence too. I do also have to say so much of this movie is shot up close and claustrophobic. And that's the kind of the situations that they're in. But I give this movie an A-. I think this is more than worth watching. I think I do agree with Chris that it's a I saw it earlier today, so I haven't even been able to sleep on a movie, and usually I'm able to sleep on a movie before we talk about it on the podcast. So yeah, I wish I had more time to kind of stew on it, but I know how the movie affected me, and the fact that I went and saw another movie afterward, and I couldn't stop thinking about Detroit afterward goes and shows you something as well. But yeah, so the movie for me is an A-, and let's wrap this up and kind of continue the conversation in spoilers.
Let's.
Where can people follow you on the internet?
For sure. You guys can find me on Twitter as well as on YouTube. Simply search my name, Chris Hartwell, or The Heartbeat, Heart spelled H-A-R-T on YouTube, and I would love for you to join me.
For me, you can follow me at Schuckster. That's SCHUCKSTR. For the show, you can follow us at The Watch and Talk. You can go to our email at thewatchandtalk@gmail.com, our website at thewatchandtalk.com, our Facebook at facebook.com/thewatchandtalk, and our brand new Instagram. What?
Whoa.
What? Yeah, follow us on Instagram at The Watch and Talk. Next week, I'm 90% sure we're going to be reviewing The Glass Castle with Brie Larson next week. But I guess that's going to be kind of open in the air for right now because we're getting kind of to the period of the year where it's not So
Slim pickings.
It's not so cut and dry what we're going to be reviewing on there. But this movie looks good to me, so we'll see how that goes, and maybe Chris will be joining me next week. Who knows? Without further ado, let's switch to spoilers. I'll tell you my favorite scene.
Yes.
Was when when Hannah Murray, who plays a character named Julie, who's also Gilly from Game of Thrones.
Yep.
When she's getting grilled about being a prostitute, she's like, "I'm not a prostitute. That's not what I'm not. That's not what I'm here for." And they say, "What are you doing here with a bunch of black people?" Right, basically. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Oh, are they black? I don't see color." And he goes, "Well, do you see me? Like, what do you see me?" And she goes, she says, "You look yellow to me, sir."
Right.
The collective, "Oh, damn," from the audience. That was a powerful moment, and that was the most yes moment that I felt, and the most power that we felt, because these men were being petty, and to kind of see their perspective from a white person, which I thought was pretty important and a powerful scene on there. Which it was terrifying too. Her dress got ripped off.
Yeah.
The fact that it hadn't gone too far right then kind of showed is a scary idea, that the cops still thought that they were going to get out of the situation somehow. At that point, it had already gone too far at that point, if you ask me.
Yeah. And the other scenes that I appreciated were the ones where there was just, I could actually see so many different ways that things could go, and yet there was still this level of survivalness, and I need to get out of this. So, for instance, the moment where Will Coulter's realized that his cop buddy has just actually shot someone and decides, you know what, it's time for us to get out of here and hope and pray that I can scare these guys enough to basically never say anything about this. And seeing I would have said, I don't see anything, when he's like, "What do you see right here?" And he's pointing at the guy who's dead on the ground. And actually having a number of them, I don't think they're being cowards in that moment. I honestly don't. I think some people could say
it's a survival mechanism.
Exactly. And then the final guy, who actually before that was almost the most, sniveling is the wrong word, but he was the most pleading, like, "Don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me." And then actually seeing him stand up and say, "There's a dead guy right there," was just.
I don't see what that got him. I don't see what that got him. I don't see why he didn't just say yes and then left and then survived and then went to the police.
Right. I think it just stirred up something really visceral in him, of seeing someone dead and just being unable to stand by. But again, I think there was something very truthful about the differing reactions in that moment and people's willingness to comply or not comply.
Krauss says to the cop that shot somebody at first, he said, "One decision you made in 10 seconds should not resonate for the rest of your life."
Oh.
Meanwhile, he just ended 2 people's lives.
Yeah.
3 people's lives technically are responsible from him total. Mm-hmm. But the fact that, it goes to show that he really finds himself superior and that he's worth a life and other people are not.
Yeah.
Or at least that these people were not, for some whatever reason it may be. I also did like that the cop, his name was Flynn. He was the one who was the most stern and the most, "You don't have to lecture me. I got this. I know what I need to do." He's the one that ends up singing first. Which I found that to be pretty riveting. Like the fact that he was sitting there explaining to the guy, he's played by Jack Rayner, explained to him, "Don't be stupid. Don't go to jail the rest of your life because of one stupid decision. Don't do this." And then the other guy is just very confident, and he goes, "Don't worry, I know what to do." And he ends up, talking to the cops about it. I'm assuming some fear tactics worked for them, so
sure,
it's interesting. But and also interesting that the judge happened to use they understood you have the right to remain silent to make their testimony inadmissible was absolutely insane. When actually being a cop, he knows it even better. They know it even more. He understood what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that ended up being inadmissible. You know, how many times have we seen real life cases been like go down like this as well? Though, how many times have we seen people get off? You know, police get off scot clean after murdering somebody.
Well, one of the things too I appreciated in that section of the film, which I thought was just a great reminder to continue to check oneself, is the scene that we've already talked about with Boyega being interrogated by those two detectives and them really pressing him, and you really feeling that they're putting the heat on, and anything that he says is just digging that hole deeper. I thought it was interesting that the symmetry when they had the Will Coulter character back in and they were interrogating him. And even though there was a bit of a symmetricalness in the way that they were putting the heat on, I felt like they were putting the heat on just that much less than they were with Boyega. And even though I think that those two guys probably would have walked away from the situation saying, oh, no, like we were, we pushed them both and we really, tried to get the truth out of both of them. I think they, even without their own knowing it, were pushing that much harder because of Boyega's color. And I thought that there was something. I appreciated how it was subtle enough, but I think if you really observe the scene truthfully, you have to admit that it felt like it was a little bit more one-sided.
And John Boyega did eventually, it seemed, get away. Right? He didn't go to jail. I don't know why they didn't show that though. Why they didn't show him getting cleared of charges.
Right. Well, it was interesting that there were a number of elements that were a little bit difficult to follow, but one of the elements was he on trial with the three cops because he was kind of on the end and no one ever addressed him. Yeah. But yeah, it was just very interesting to see how that played out. But again, I just appreciated his perspective because he was so lightly played throughout the film, and you just kind of accepted him as this upstanding guy who, kind of in a confusing way for me again, like why exactly was he in this hotel? Like if he's just guarding this supermarket, why did he end up in there anyways? Regardless, though. The reason that the scene where he was being interrogated was so powerful was the fact that I'd almost forgotten about his involvement and in my mind completely dismissed the idea ever that he could be a suspect in the situation, which was why it was so horrifying because you really did feel like there's so much miscommunication and so much dishonesty and so much fear driving all of this.
Yep. Fear.
It's impossible for even the most upstanding, the person who's trying the hardest to keep his cool and does keep his cool and actually, brings coffee to these racist guys and really does try and like, hey, let's go upstairs and let's try and find this gun because if we can find that, then we can get you guys out of here and just I mean I was really riveted and depressed honestly by the way that played out because it really was so unjustified.
Have you ever wanted to strangle John Krasinski so much?
Oh my gosh, he played that lawyer character well, but in a way that was just heartbreaking.
And to show why they end up having the upper hand, the way he was arguing it was like, wow, I can't believe they're actually making it. Like, I can't believe how much they've switched this on set completely. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it showed somebody yell out. If this was a bunch of white guys and some black girls, it would have been a completely different story.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too
Could anybody argue with this after watching this movie? Could anybody say no? The same thing would have happened.
Right.
I don't think anybody.
Yeah, for me, the final title card was interesting though too, where basically the final title card says that obviously this court case played out the way that it did, and the story was constructed and dramatized based off of the testimony of these different individuals. And that too almost felt like a test. I know, but it almost for me felt like a test to the audience. Like how are you going to respond to that? Because this jury was made up of Caucasians. The judge was Caucasian. The lawyers were Caucasian, and we have their side as written down in the annals of history and in how this courtroom drama played out. But now we're getting the witness and testimony of these witnesses. Who are many of them African American. So like this is almost their side of the story. So now that you know that, how are you going to respond to that?
See, the thing is, the movie, like I said, it tries to make it seem like it's arguing both sides, at least to some extent. The movie clearly makes a stance that those three white cops should have spent the rest of their life behind bars. That they were murderers.
Right.
And regardless of any of the other stances, few bad apple arguments, whatever the arguments may be, it did make a stance that they were the bad guys of the movie and they should have been put behind jail. But I think the question is, did she cede enough ground for people to listen to that argument? Because we're living in a time right now where I've never seen such, I guess, comfortability with being overtly racist. I feel like a lot of people. I just haven't seen it like this, at least since since the early '90s when I lived in North Carolina. When I was a really young little kid, and it's barely what I can remember from that period of time. Not since then have I seen just so much just people being comfortable coming out and saying the things they say about Muslims right now, or things that they'll say in counter argument to the Black Lives Matter argument. That wasn't something people were comfortable saying 5 years ago, 6 years ago, but they, whatever reason, are now. So are those people going to listen to this argument? Probably not, regardless. Regardless of how much ground she's ceded in it, they're probably not going to listen to it regardless. They're going to look at this movie as propaganda instead of trying to understand their blind spots, like you said earlier.
Yeah, it's tough. And I do hope that people are able to just, be confronted by it in a good way versus just allow it to bolster their own ideology and stance and viewpoints. Because again, it doesn't hold your hand, and I think it does expect a lot from the audience, and believe in their ability to ask those questions and to be open to their own brokenness and blind spots. So it's a worth your time, absolutely. I'm definitely
it also captured PTSD too at the very toward the end, that he could not continue to sing, what he construed as singing for white people.
Sure.
After the traumatic experience, he saw 3 people murdered before him. One of them was his really good friend. And it was also interesting to see Anthony Mackie's character too, that he was, a Vietnam War veteran, or Korean War veteran, or whatever the
I believe gosh, I'm bad with dates on these.
Yeah, sure. But the fact that he was still treated, I think that there was even a line of dialogue to somebody from one army man or somebody in military uniform saying, "Hey, shit, welcome home." That they go and they fought for 8 years overseas, and he came back, and this is how he's treated when he gets back home.
Yeah.
Where can he feel comfortable? Right? Where can a person like Anthony Mackie feel comfortable in this day and age? In that day and age, back overseas, because he's not better off home. Right? He's actually perhaps even in worse dire straits when he's back at home.
Yeah. The war continues.
He also showed how he was conditioned to deal with authority. Also.
Right. Yeah. Sure. And I mean, he definitely, of all the ones in the hotel room, seemed to understand quite clearly. Okay, this is my best chance of survival if I comply in these ways.
Yep.
And again, that made it all the more frustrating when he was just as badly, if not worse, treated.
Right.
That again, there's no reasoning with hatred. There's no reasoning with blind, bigotry, and it's depressing. It's difficult.
And it did feel good to see the police captain or whatever chase him down out of the. Out in the parking lot. I enjoyed when he called him a racist fuck or whatever. However that went down, I appreciate that scene too. So anyway, all right. Where can people follow you on the internet, just in case we still whatever?
If you guys are still listening, that's awesome. You guys can find me on Twitter as well as on YouTube. Simply search Chris Hartwell.
I just have to say, it's movies like this that make you think and make a conversation, and sometimes it's hard. It's hard for 2 white guys to sit here and discuss these kind of topics on it because, it's these are tough subjects, and for Catherine Bigelow to address this so head on, I appreciate it, and I think that this feels like the right time for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's going to do anything positive for the discourse. But I feel like movies are the best way of creating empathy with another person's situation of anything. I feel like it can do it better than even a book can. And you know, somebody could probably give me a big argument against that. And sure enough, fine, maybe you're right. But you know, if you can't look at you know, a story like this and see the situation the victims of this movie are in and not think, wow, that sucks. I don't know. It's like I don't know what happened in your life that makes you think so differently than the general consensus of what humanity is. I don't see how you could have your blinders up so hard to the struggles of people that are different than you. It just is that is shocking to me. And I don't think that there's really going to be many people that disagree with me right now listening this deep into this review. Because I think that a lot of them are going to come out of this movie feeling like it's propaganda. But that's not. It's what I see it as is trying to just seed some ground to some people and let them see a different side. And maybe it'll do it for some people. Maybe it won't. You can follow me at Schuckster. That's SCHUCKSTER. For the show, you can follow us at The Watch and Talk and our Facebook, facebook.com/The Watch and Talk. Email us at thewatchtalk@gmail.com and our Instagram, instagram.com/The Watch and Talk or at The Watch and Talk, however you search through Instagram stuff.
The best of luck.
And we should be reviewing The Glass Castle next week. So that's it. I'm Dylan Schuck.
And I'm Chris Hartwell.
And we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
All right. Much better than the last time we talked about this issue like this where I just need to go and butcher the whole thing.
That was
what movie was it?
It was the it's the slavery and he's led the revolution.
Oh yeah,
Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, where after I was like, fuck, I feel awkward. I don't feel like I explained myself at all. I'm gonna go cut the shit out of all of that. Yeah, much better. Much better this time. Anyway,
well done.
Send this over to me, and yeah, I guess you'll let me know in a couple days. You think if we're gonna do?
Yes, I will let you know. I will let you know by Sunday for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks, dude. Peace.
Bye. All right. Hi, such a